Welcome back to Capitol Tonight, a statewide look at politics. I'm Tim Boym. Our featured guest tonight is Mark Harris. He's a Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. The Democrat in the race is current U.S. Senator Kay Hagan. At this point, it appears Harris will face three opponents in the May primary. They're House Speaker Tom Tillis, Kerry physician Greg Brannon, and nurse practitioner Heather Grant. Reverend Harris joins me in studio now. Great to see you, sir. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're a senior pastor at First Baptist Church in Charlotte. I think a lot of people first would ask, why does a pastor want to get into politics? What made you make this leap?
Well, I think that there comes a time when you realize that it's the right time to do something. I think all of us have felt that there is a great vacuum of leadership taking place in our nation's capital. I think all of us have witnessed it over not only the past several weeks and months, but really over years. And really there's been a burden in my heart for our country, a burden to step up and offer the leadership that I could bring to the table, and recognizing that really and truly our country is at a point where we need to regain perspective.
I think most assume you'll be the social conservative in this race. Is that fair to say, and what do you hope to focus on in this race?
Well, I try to tell folks that probably a great influence in my life was as a 14-year-old. My parents dropped me off 3 days a week at the Americans for Reagan office on Healy Drive in Winston-Salem. And one of the things that was embedded in my mind and heart, even as a 14-year-old, was Ronald Reagan's approach to American politics. He said it really is like building a three-legged stool. You got to have a strong domestic agenda, you got to have a strong foreign policy, and you've got to have strong traditional values. And if you weaken either one of those legs or try to break one of those legs off, that stool cannot stand. So I really believe that there is a need for a candidate that is a strong fiscal conservative, a strong social conservative that understands that three-legged stool.
You know, there's been a lot of talk within Republican circles about how the party should move forward. Some folks believe that the party's focused too much on social issues. Do you disagree with that?
I do disagree with that. I think that a lot of times when you look at the political reality of the 2012 primary, when the marriage amendment was on the ballot, that was an opportunity for North Carolinians, if you will, to have a moral compass placed in front of them. And 61% of the citizens of this state voted in that event to pass a marriage amendment saying marriage would be defined as between a man and a woman. So I think that when people are given a clear contrast, I think we make a real mistake in Republican politics if we think that we've got to shift to the middle or shift to the left to become more palatable to independents or more palatable to Democrats. I think that really whether you're Republican, independent, or Democrat, people are looking for somebody that believes something, somebody that has a core of beliefs and is willing to stand on those.
Are you going to, at least initially, obviously in the primary process, run against Speaker Tillis and Grant and versus Kay Hagan, or are you going to focus on Kay Hagan?
I think our focus is going to be on Kay Hagan. Our intention is to run one of the most focused, disciplined campaigns in the history of North Carolina. And I think that we've got to draw that contrast with Kay Hagan, and I think in the process, Republican voters will recognize that really and truly I provide that contrast with her, plus hopefully an ability to communicate that contrast and really speak to the hearts and minds of all North Carolinians.
All right, let's get to some of the issues. Affordable Care Act, obviously, you know, right at the center of everything right now. If you were in Congress right now, what would you want done?
Well, I think that we've got to fix this train wreck. Train wreck being the word that even Democrats have used that were a part of putting Obamacare together. I think that we've got to find a way of repealing it, quite frankly, or stopping it. I think there are a few folks in D.C. who have understood and tried to sound the alarm to the American people of what a tragedy this legislation is going to be. When you got the Congressional Budget Office telling us that in 10 years we're going to be spending $3 trillion on health care, and people say, well, you know, we've gotten so used to $1 billion here, $1 trillion here, what's $3 trillion? Well, to put that in perspective, when our annual federal spending is $3.5 trillion now, and you're talking about just health care being $3 trillion in just a decade, That's unsustainable, Tim. And until we recognize exactly how damaging and how dangerous this legislation is, then we're going to have serious problems. So I think Republicans have got to develop their plan, and we have some real solutions. I mean, like expanding health savings accounts, of allowing folks to purchase their health insurance across state lines, of some serious tort reform that will allow us to be able to put an end to these frivolous lawsuits that are just health care up. Republicans have got some good ideas. We've just done a poor job of communicating that and getting that to the American people. So I think we've got to come with a different plan.
Well, let me ask about that, because you talk about the communicating part, because obviously churches now play a large role in helping the needy across the country. A lot of Democrats in particular see expanding Medicaid as helping those folks. How do you resolve that issue then of helping the most needy in this country?
Well, I think there's been a shift in this country actually over the last generation that has been a dangerous shift. There was a time that people understood that across this country that the church really did meet the needs of people. In fact, there was a certain authority that came to the church across this country, because if you look at all of our orphanages, if you look at all of your hospitals, if you look at all of your really education institutions, including our colleges and universities, all started by churches. Soup kitchens, rescue missions, all started by churches. Somewhere along the line, the government understood that important biblical principle that authority comes through service. And the government stepped in and began to present and provide all of those services. And unfortunately, when the government stepped forward to do it, the church stepped back. And honestly, I think I speak to that from a unique perspective, having spent 24 and a half years now as a senior pastor, that the church has stepped back, far too far back, in meeting the needs of people. And I think what's got to happen in Washington, D.C., that will ever get this debt ceiling under control and those kind of things, we've got to figure out a way to slowly reduce that spigot of money just flowing from the federal government, and at the same time that spigot is reduced, that ministries and churches and nonprofits and charities are able to step up and begin to meet those needs again. It's not going to happen overnight.
We have time for one more question. Obviously, the shutdown, obviously the budget deal that's going to come up in January again, another either continuing resolution or budget long term.
Right.
We almost can't say without laughing now, it seems like, regardless of the party there. But what is your focus moving forward? I mean, is entitlement reform top of your list? And do you think a shutdown would be necessary again in January?
Well, I hope we don't have to see ourselves getting to that point again. What we desperately need is a budget. And you're not going to get a budget until you have leadership. And that's the reason I think there is such a vacuum of leadership we're seeing in Washington, D.C. If we can have a budget where everybody knows what the rules are, where everybody knows what the deal is, then you can begin to make decisions. Yeah, we've got to make some hard decisions about entitlements. We've got to make hard decisions about how we reduce spending. But, you know, Americans are making those hard decisions every day. As a pastor of a church in 2007, we saw our revenue, like many businesses and other places across the country, sort of top out. And then we went through the downturn in 2008 and 2009. Well, we all had to make hard, serious decisions about priorities and reduce our budgets because we were dealing with a reduction in revenue. Well, if our churches operate that way, and your household and my household operates that way, why would we think that the federal government should operate any differently? So until we get back to putting together a budget which allows us to set priorities and determine how we're going to deal with this issue, then we're not going to see any solutions to the problem.
All right, Reverend Mark Harris, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully the first of many appearances. Good to see you, sir. Thank you so much. All right, we have to take one last break, but when we return, our weekly Reporter Roundtable takes on the stories of the week. Stay with us.